Here on the Quick Start tab of Corel PhotoPaint X6, I'm going to click New Blank Document. As you can see, we have a dialog that really looks very similar to the dialog that opens in Corel Draw when we create a new document. There are a couple of important differences, however. Remember, Corel Draw works with lines and fills that are vector-based. Even though we have a resolution setting in Corel Draw, overall, it doesn't affect the final result. It only affects some areas, mainly working with shadows and when we do actually work with bitmap images. However, here in PhotoPaint, we are actually creating a new image, and actually the end result is a bitmap image. So resolution is everything. For example, we're by default set at 72 dpi. This is great for when you're working on the web or for display on a computer screen. However, for professional print, or if you've got a printer attached to your computer and you intend to print color images particularly, you'll want to choose 300 dpi. Another important area is color mode. Now, by default, 24-bit RGB is selected. And really, unless you have a professional reason to choose an alternate color mode, I recommend you stick with 24-bit RGB. It will give you access to all of PhotoPaint's rich effects and features. So I'm sure you know how to do all the rest. Let's click OK. PhotoPaint is a bitmap, pixel, editing and creation program. Put another way, we could say PhotoPaint is a digital image editing program. If you recall, in Corel Draw, we said Corel Draw is a vector-based program that works with lines and fills, and we have the added advantage of being able to import digital images as well. However, here in PhotoPaint, think of it as the reverse. PhotoPaint is where we work with digital images, and we have the added advantage of being able to work with lines and fills as well. I'm going to select my zoom tool and I'm going to zoom in very close right on the edge of this leopard. Can you see all of these little squares? Each one of those is what we call a pixel. Now, if you recall, when we set this document up, we set the number of pixels. Remember, we set 300 dpi, which means 300 dots per inch, or 300 pixels per inch. Effectively, that means we have rows of 300 of these little squares, one after the other, in every inch. The higher the resolution, or the more dots you have inside of an inch, the more crisp that photo will be. The less dots, like 72 dpi for example, you'll see images when you print them out on paper that are pixelated and not of high quality. Okay, let's zoom back out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we can create objects and work with lines and fills. Just as in Corel Draw, we have a number of tools that we can create shapes with. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool. Did you notice as I selected the rectangle tool, the property bar automatically updates with all of the parameters and settings for the rectangle tool. So whenever you select a tool, always look up to the property bar. Additionally, when we select a tool, the hints docker will refresh with hints about how to use that tool. In this case, of course, the rectangle tool. And new to version X6, we now have a videos tab here in PhotoPaint. There are some great videos here on how to mask, how to do various things. So if you're new to PhotoPaint, be sure to view the videos. The entire interface of PhotoPaint really does work the same way as in Corel Draw. We can easily undock a toolbar, click on the grab handles and drag. To redock, simply double click on the title bar. Same with the dockers, we can collapse and of course expand the dockers. Now that I have my rectangle tool selected, I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle. So click and begin to move to shape your rectangle in any direction. Now, do you notice the point that I clicked is really what we could call the anchor point? However, if I hold my finger on the Shift key, it actually becomes the center point, and I can resize out from the center. If I want a perfect shape, I would hold my finger on Control at the same time, or Control without the Shift key. But for right now, I'm going to just use Shift and size out from the center. Can you notice these marching ants? Well, in fact, that's what we call them. It's a moving dotted line. It's what we call a marquee. In this case, it's the object marquee. Now up here on the property bar, we can actually turn the display of the marquee off or on again. And for the remainder of this video, I'm going to leave that turned off. You'll also notice that our rectangle has a grey-blue fill and a green outline. Can you see that these two colours are represented here on the left-hand side? We've got a foreground colour and we've got a fill colour. So the foreground colour is the outline colour. One thing that's very different between PhotoPaint and Corel Draw is this. With my pick tool selected and my object selected, I simply can't go and click on the colour palette to change the colour. I actually have to make this decision before creating the object. Let me delete this. I'm going to come over and I'm going to select my Ellipse tool. Now to change the fill colour and the outline thickness and colour, we can do all of that here on the property bar. For example, the outline thickness. It's measured in pixels. Remember, we're in a bitmap pixel program. So I might reduce this to a somewhat thinner outline. And to change the fill, for example, I can click and choose between many different types. If I choose bitmap fill and then want to edit that fill, click, up comes a dialog which allows me to choose an alternate bitmap fill. So for example, if I choose this one down the bottom, I can select some parameters, click OK, and when I create my ellipse, I have that fill and outline color, as you can see. You'll also notice as I bring new colors and images into our design, those colors automatically update on the default image palette. Okay, let's delete that. I also want to show you, I'll select my ellipse tool, that you can actually create great looking fountain fills. Edit, and what we'll do is we'll make some adjustments here. So I might choose from brown through to a nice golden yellow, click OK, and this time when I create an ellipse, as you can see, we have a beautiful fountain fill. And delete. The last thing I want to show you is if you directly click on the color swatch, double click, it will bring up a palette for you. If you select the eyedropper, you can select a color direct from one of your images. So for example, click, the palette updates, tells you what the hex number is, what the RGB values are, and when you click OK, it's applied to the swatch. Double click. Now here, I'm going to choose a solid fill, and then I'm going to click Edit, and again, I'm going to select the eyedropper, and I'm going to click on one of these lighter browns. Click OK, and this time, when I create an ellipse, release my mouse, as you can see, we have these parameters. It's very, very simple. Okay, selecting my pick tool. With my pick tool selected, I can scale and resize with the same handles as we have in Corel Draw. Click on a corner scaling handle and we can scale up and down in size, maintaining perspective and scale, just getting smaller or larger. I can horizontally resize on the left or the right side, and the same applies vertically at the bottom or at the top. One thing that is different, however, is once you've finished making your changes, you'll see this little red circle with a line, and it basically indicates you have to apply your change. You can either click the apply button on the property bar or right click and click apply. Let me just delete this, and using my leopard here, I'm just going to demonstrate for you, right click and apply, a few more differences between Corel Draw and PhotoPaint. And that is, if I click again, I see the rotation handles, but if I click again, I see a new set of handles that are called the distorting handles. Watch what happens. As I begin to move, I'm almost lowering the age of the leopard. It's going from a mature adult to what looks like a kitten. Isn't that amazing? And you can create all sorts of interesting effects with the distortion handles. Just right click and click reset. If I click again, I bring up another set of handles, the perspective handles. As I click and drag, can you see that I get a real sense of perspective? It looks like I'm looking right at the front of the leopard and down his back. Right click and reset. Well, for this next effect, we're going to have a quick look at the Object Manager first. The Object Manager, similar to Corel Draw, displays all of the objects that exist within our design, generally in the order with which we created them unless we've changed that. We call this the stacking order, and the object on the top of the stacking order is usually the last one we've created. We can easily change the display of the thumbnails. I can increase the size. And you'll notice that each thumbnail is being displayed relative to where it's sitting on the background. For example, my tiger canvas is on the right side of the background, and that's where it's being displayed here in the thumbnail display. I can change this by turning on thumbnail extents mode, and effectively that gives us a zoom in of each object without the background. You'll notice here next to the tiger canvas there's a little arrow. If I click that, it shows you that this object is made up of two objects that have actually been grouped together. Same as within Corel Draw, we can actually turn on and off the display of objects, making it easier to work with many objects that may exist within our design. Well, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to draw an ellipse. And I'm going to change the colours in a different way. I'm going to right click on the colour white and left click on the colour black. And as you can see, I've changed the parameters of my ellipse. I'm going to click and drag with my finger on the shift key and just create an ellipse. Now I want to change the stacking order. I want this to be below the tiger. So I'm going to select and drag and put below the tiger cutaway. And in fact, I'll rename the object. Click, and I'll call this ellipse. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this ellipse to create a mask. So I'll select my pick tool, come up to mask, and create mask from object. You can see we now have black marching ants around the outside of the ellipse object. Always remember that your object marquee has blue marching ants and a mask has black marching ants. Now that I've got a mask, I'm actually going to select the tiger cutaway. I'm going to just reposition him there like that. And what I'm going to do is use this mask to help me edit the tiger cutaway. Now remember, a mask will only affect the object you have selected. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to select the eraser tool. And you'll notice that I can erase inside of the mask, but when I click, I'm clicking and trying to erase outside the mask, I can't. Control Z, undo. If I invert the mask, I can have the reverse. So I'll come up, click invert mask, and now I'll click. I can't erase inside, but I can erase outside. So can you see I'm using the shape of the mask to erase the tiger cutaway with the perfect curve of my ellipse? When I'm finished, simply click remove mask, and doesn't that look fantastic? You know what, for a final touch, let's click the drop shadow tool and click and pull underneath, and we'll slide up the transparency, we'll slide up the feather, stretch back a little further, and doesn't that simply look amazing? Working with digital images in PhotoPaint really is very easy.